India is bad at batting at number 4 in ODI cricket. How do I know this? Because it's probably the thing told to me the most on social media. And the press are mentioning it, well, almost as much. And I never looked it up, because when so many people just tell you something like that, you believe it. But what if I told you that India was not actually a bad team at batting at number 4 in ODI cricket? Would that blow your mind? This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. First, we need a history lesson to work out where this all came from. India do not actually have an incredible run of number 4s in ODI cricket. Their best players generally get sucked into the top 3. And I find this interesting because the other two best Asian teams have a lot of scoring number 4s. Sri Lanka have the number 2 and number 3 on the all-time list, and Pakistan have 3 in the top 10 as well. So it's an Indian peculiarity to have that many top scoring number 4s. But that is not saying that they've never had any. Mohammad Azharuddin was outstanding before, what happened at the end of his career. Rahul Dravid spent a lot of time there as well. And of course, Yuvraj Singh has also made a lot of runs batting at number 4. And he is important because he stops playing in 2017, but really his career stops at the end of 2013 because of his cancer treatment. So since 2014, India hasn't had a single player with 1,000 runs at the number 4 position. Scotland does. In fact, so does Namibia, USA, and also Papua New Guinea. So there is an issue there. And it's not that those teams have better options, of course. They have just stuck with them, and India have tried quite a few different players. There's also been 2 World Cups in that period. In 2015, Ajinkya Rahane was the 4 in that first edition when Yuvraj wasn't available. He averaged just over 40 and struck in the low 80s. There are actually some number 4s who really exploded in that tournament, but essentially Rahane's numbers are fine. Maybe a little bit slow, but he's next to Joe Root here. I mean, anytime your number 4 averages 40 plus with an 80 strike rate in a World Cup, especially for that era, you're going to take it. So what happened in 2019? Well, everyone had a go. Over the course of the tournament, India used 4 different options at number 4. Rishabh Pant did it 4 times. I understand that's 4 quite a lot, but these are all things that happen. Hardik Pandya got promoted a couple of times, Vijay Shankar did it, and KL Rahul also had a go. It's also worth pointing out that many fans thought Ambati Rayudu should have been in that spot as well, meaning that no one really took the role, and also India didn't do very well with their collective number 4s. India had the second worst average of any team in the 2019 tournament, and their strike rate wasn't anywhere near good enough to compensate for that. Since that last World Cup, India has tried 11 players at number 4, and that seems like a lot, right? Because I read that number in plenty of places about this particular problem. In fact, only 2 countries have used more number 4s than them. The UAE, who lost pretty much their entire team, and I think everyone who owns a bat in Dubai has actually batted at number 4, and the West Indies, who are trying to solve their problems. Neither of those teams are really the company you want to be keeping if you're a World Cup favourite. But on the same amount and with 1 less is Australia and England. But these teams all play a lot, right? So how many games does each number 4 actually play in? When you look at that, you realize that the 11 players that India have used is not actually that many. Essentially, the 11 players looks a lot worse because they've been experimenting, because they play more games than anywhere else. Their number 4s are playing 6 games each, which looks about normal compared to New Zealand and South Africa. Certainly, they're nowhere near the level of Netherlands or Australia. And yes, if you're an Indian fan, your dream situation is to be like Ireland, which basically found 2 number 4s and just stuck with them for a whole cycle. But when you do actually look at it, I just don't think that India has gone through an epic list. They just play a lot more than other teams. And I don't want this number 4 stuff to just sound like it's a complete myth that only the media and social media actually believe. Because here is Rohit Sharma talking about India's problems with number 4s since Yuvraj Singh. And so that means that basically everyone with a stake in Indian cricket believes this. India cannot bat at number 4 in one-day internationals. That number is currently cursed for them. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in Kimber and get 3 months free today. But something about this never felt right to me. Like watching India, I never thought to myself, do they have a black hole in the middle of their order? And so I checked their numbers at number 4 compared to all ODI teams, and suddenly, India looked pretty good. Certainly nothing compared to the Yuvraj Singh years, but there was nothing here to tell me there was a big issue. Very rarely was India a less than average team scoring in this position. This is all teams in ODI cricket though, and India is certainly just not a normal side. They are the World Cup favourites. So let's add some of the other potential favourites for this tournament here. So I understand that this is a little bit messy here, but India is orange, and you can see compared to the other favourites for this World Cup, their last few years have been pretty much middle of the road for this slot. So this is India versus combined number 4s from Australia, South Africa, England and New Zealand. Remember, in that list are players like Eoin Morgan and Ross Taylor and whatever overperformer South Africa currently uses in that spot. India's numbers since the 2019 World Cup completely hold up. In fact, the perfect example of just how weird this fascination with India not having number 4s is Australia. Never once has any Australian fan said to me that they need to fix their problems at number 4 in ODIs. Yet since 2015, it's been a pretty consistent problem for the Aussies. India has been way better. Even when there are sorted random collections, they have completely held up. So what the hell is everyone talking about? What actually is the issue? One thing is that Yuvraj Singh was not just a good number 4, but a very noticeable one. He was a complete outlier in how he played that position, scoring fast in a very powerful way. Let me show you this slightly different. This is all the players with 2,500 ODI runs at number 4 and the year they made their debut. You can see there are 4 outliers on this list. Viv Richards, who is just ridiculous, AB de Villiers and Eoin Morgan, very much at the cutting edge of modern ODI batting, and Yuvraj Singh. Now, he's not quite in the elite company of these other guys in terms of strike rate, but he's way off the regular type folks. And we see this all the time, right? A team has a player who does their job really well, and then they disappear, and perfectly normal and respectable replacements cannot live up to the memory of them. Losing someone like this just leaves a hole. And this is a slightly different situation, but the last year of his career, Ross Taylor really struggled, and that is 2021. And then the first year of 2002 was his replacement, and New Zealand struggled as well. But for years, New Zealand had an incredible number 4. They just had that position on lockdown. They didn't have to worry about it at all. And Yuvraj never made runs on Taylor's level, partly because he attacked more. But essentially, this is what happens when you pull someone out of the role sometimes. Things just fluctuate a lot more. However, India did actually find someone. The weird thing is that since Shreyas Iyer has been around, they have actually been a very good team at batting at number 4. Of the players with 700 runs at this position since the last World Cup, I would argue he has been the second best. His average is excellent, but his strike rate struck me the most here. Being that this World Cup will be played on Indian pitches, where he averages more than 50 at a runner ball in ODIs at home, it's a pretty good time to have him around. But Iyer hasn't played much, and most of his runs were an age back. They were actually just after the last World Cup, and the truth is that the only time we really ever care about ODIs anymore is pretty much when a World Cup is on. The time when we least worry about a World Cup is just after the last one. And since that point, he just hasn't played all that much for India. And after his last 100 in that position, he actually struggled in a few knocks after that. So he didn't get the credit he deserved at the start, and then he was part of the slump. And it is worth talking about because I think the reason that this has come up again is because there was actually a slump at number 4 for India. But I want to explain this. You can see here that there are 17 innings without a 50. If this was one player, I would be massively worried. But this is actually 7 different batters. And the players include Rishabh Pant, KL Rahul, Hardik Pandya and Iyer. There's no player I have just listed there who cannot do that job. And I think if any one of those players had done it all the way through, the numbers would be fine. And the only concern you might have is that no one is quite settled in these positions. But this is a World Cup where a lot of players are not actually going to be that settled in their positions because the top players don't play a lot of one-day international cricket anymore. And I don't see this as a problem coming up, but perhaps lacking a role. Of course, if you look at this graph, you'll see that the runs eventually did come back. The teams without quality number 4s, Netherlands, Afghanistan, and Sri Lanka, for instance, they just don't really have the talent to be able to fill these roles as well. Whereas India just eventually got KL Rahul to make some runs there. After 17 innings without a 50, 4 of the next 7 had them. That is just sometimes how these patterns go. For instance, I started working on this piece on the 1st of September. That's because that was the height of people talking about this, which was before this sudden flurry. Until that date, in this year, India had been averaging less than 20 from their number 4s. Their next 8 games after that, it was over 70. I know that might sound random, but that's a fairly normal pattern, especially if your main three options in Rishabh, KL, and Iyer were all injured at certain times. This isn't really a problem about the number 4 position. The issue really is that India had so many of their top 8 batting prospects not available to them. Every team in the world would struggle if that was the case. And some people will have heard everything I have said so far and they still won't believe. So let's look at India's batting average by position since the last World Cup. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, wait a minute, there is a slight dip here at number 4 for India. And I wondered if that was meaningful. Well, this is the other 5 favourite teams for the World Cup in that same period. They all have that dip at number 4. And India is actually better than the combined average of the other best teams, and not by a little bit either. This doesn't just make them an above average group. This means that they stand out even compared to their main competition. They are elite amongst the elite. But fans need something to worry about. And so even a completely normal dip, especially given the injuries and experimentations that India have been doing, is seen as another sign that India will not win this World Cup. Whoever India actually ends up with at number 4, or even if they have a couple of options, they may or may not make any runs. That is how it works in every single position. But they had a terrible 17 innings and then a sensational 7. Cricket has seen that pattern a lot of times in the past. But basically, what if I told you that India was not actually a bad team at batting number 4 in ODI cricket? That they are instead, what is the word? Oh yeah, good.